welcome to Experience. This is the new weekly podcast where we aim to demystify human behaviour by looking at the news headlines. We take those headlines and we stick them on the psychologist's couch, and not just any psychologist's couch, Peter Kinderman's psychologist's couch. Peter, good morning.
Good morning.
Peter joins me each week so we can go through the headlines and have a discussion about what's going on. And my name is Hilary Jeffs. If you have anything you would like to talk to us about, if you have anything that you would like us to cover, please get in touch. Our email is hello@experiencepodco.com. And Dylan got in touch because he wanted to pull us up slightly. Well, me specifically. We say that we're all about things being factually accurate. That is our ethos of our pod. And yet, when we discussed the fastest mile last week, I kind of happened to use a bit of hyperbole. And that hyperbole said that Josh Kerr simply, in order to get his world record, did sort of 3-minute 42 ice baths and manifested it by writing it down. Clearly, the man did some running. It is a clearly not really moment. This is what's going on. I've got it on my T-shirt. So if you spot us doing a clearly not really moment, you need to get in touch so that we can get officially a rap on the knuckles. Agreed? Clearly not really, Pete. That's what we're going to have to do. Now, we're going to come on to names in just a minute. Pete, you're never a Pete, are you? You're a Peter.
No, I am a Pete. I'm a Pete to a few of my friends and some of my family. But rather interestingly, even people who introduce me as Pete often default back to Peter. I think I'm just a Peter. It's what fits.
Or maybe
my
I just haven't crossed the threshold into that sacred group of people who can call you Pete yet. I'll stick with Peter and we'll see how we get on.
Yeah, it might take a few years.
Well, let's hope we're still going in a few years so we can see if that has actually happened. I was at a barbecue last week and my husband did not realise that our neighbour called Marie actually is Nora, that she'd changed her name. And it's not the first time she's changed her name either, because she first changed her name when she went to university. She's now in her 70s, so that would have been in her early 20s. And she was then Maria from West Side Story, don't you know? She obviously thought there was some allure to that. It's quite interesting, isn't it? People changing names because they're so central to our identity.
Yes, and they're central to our identity. They actually convey huge amounts of information. It might not be information that's good. It's probably information that is, in a sense, accurate. So your name, as in the name recorded on your birth certificate, obviously there's technical links to all the information that the state holds about you, but also it tells you pretty accurately the birth gender that you were assigned at birth. That's a fundamental thing. Most names, most places around the world are very clearly either stereotypically male or female. But it tells you other things. It tells you in English culture, it tells you your class. So if somebody is called Jocelyn or Titus or Araminta, then it tells you who they are. In the British Army, you've got Tommy, hence that right-wing idiot choosing the name Tommy because a hyphenated surname doesn't fit with the working class ethos, but Tommy does, whereas all of the officers are Rupert. And it's true. It's true in, maybe it's clearly not really thing, but it is certainly true that names convey huge amounts of information.
Clearly not really.
Yep. And people do that. So when you meet somebody and you hear that their name is, Araminta Lennon Yaxley, then you think, oh, right, well, she comes from a moneyed background. It might have been that she's chosen, and also that she's female. She might have chosen that name in order to convey that image. Or she might have been given it at birth. When you know that fact as well, then things change too. So one of my probably boring anecdotes is when I was very young and had just started working, I fell in love with the woman who signed the letters about expenses claims because I was working in Yorkshire and she signed herself Gabriella de Jorvik. So immediately
Gabriella de Jorvik. I like it.
So I had this idea of a sort of pre-Norman conquest, flaxen-haired princess of the northern powerhouse. And it turned out that somebody told me that, maybe they were lying, somebody told me that she'd changed her name from Sharon Potts, and I instantly fell out of love with her.
Yes, so, no, I can see how that happened. My friend at uni hated my name so much that she changed it. She refused to call me Hillary. I think it was at the time of Hillary Mangle from Neighbours, and she just thought, no, I'm not doing that name. So she called me Hillbilly, and that was shortened to Billy. And I'm not the only Hillary I know who goes by the name Billy. It's just I didn't choose it. But my name came about quite an interesting way. You probably had never guessed, but my siblings chose my name, and they chose Hillary after Father Hilary, their favourite priest. Yes, we did grow up in quite a Catholic background. And Anne, which is my middle name, came from Sister Anne. And then Father Hilary and Sister Anne left the parish together. I always said that was the reason why I'm no longer religious. Yeah, so they eloped, I think. So Father Hilary and Sister Anne, if you want to get in touch and let us know how the last few decades went, we'd love to hear about it.
Yeah, they're probably running an ashram in Vietnam or something.
Something very glamorous.
I've been extremely fortunate, so I haven't been forced with a number of choices that people have to make. So, and yeah, maybe if I had been named something else, then it would have been difficult. But I've always been fortunate in that the sort of prejudices of the world seem to favour people like me, being male and heterosexual and educated and white. It kind of things fall into my lap, and my name.
You are the Holy Grail, aren't you?
Yeah,
in fact, we can just blame you for everything now.
Yeah,
everything
I
that's
just
wrong
happen
with the
to have
world.
fallen into the crosshairs, and that's it.
Yeah.
But my name kind of fits into that as well, and the Kinderman bit is quite useful because it's slightly different, so it's kind of
Now I want to
memorable,
talk about Kinderman, okay?
But I haven't,
because you would be the best present from a chocolate egg. Let's just put it that way. I mean, I'd be very happy with that.
I convinced my colleague's secretary for about 6 years that I was the heir to the Kinder Egg. And she got really stroppy about things like, why am I claiming expenses when I can clearly afford it? And we just carried it on for about 6 years. Yeah.
Great. Well, now we know what you're like. But why Kinderman and not, as you clearly are, it is a name that has become a self-fulfilling prophecy, Kinder Man. You are a kinder man.
That is a very, well, I think there's a clear answer to that, which is it's German in origin. So, it's
Kinder. So it's child
Kinder.
man. Okay.
So child man.
Well,
so
it also is a self-fulfilling prophecy for most men I know.
Well, yeah, and that's probably true. Yeah, so I think that none of the people down the male line have ever questioned the fact that it was pronounced in the German form all the way down. So that's what it is. People very, very rarely say Kinderman. I don't know why, but there you go. So,
do you know, just like the royal family, Peter is descended from Germans. There you go.
Yeah,
always comes around.
Some Germans.
So in terms of the psychology about names, because I've chosen never to change my name when I've got married, just because why? If I was going to change my name, I think I'd go back through all the matriarchs and find as far back as I could the earliest maiden name, just so that I could carry on that line. But instead, no, I am carrying on my father's line. And yet my mother's name, probably shouldn't say it, should I? Because you'll be able to get in all my bank accounts. But it was much nicer than Jeff's. It was Greensmith, which is quite nice, quite lovely. Clearly shows their roots. They must have been grocers at some point or another.
Or organisers of modern festivals.
Oh, that's so much more me. No, I think shopkeepers probably more like it. Anyway, so how do people cope when they do change their name?
Well, people change their names quite often. And of course, traditionally, women have changed their name at marriage, and that's the thing. People also incidentally change their name when they get doctorates, and people change their name when they get elevated to the House of Lords. So people do change their name. And the idea of there's all sorts of variants, isn't it? There's the substituting your middle name for your first name. So there's quite a lot of communities. I think the British community is relatively common that the first name is the one that goes on the birth certificate, but the second name is the one that the family always call you, and that happens quite a lot. That it really isn't a name change, but it's a choice of how you refer to yourself.
So what about, you said about your name being really typical, about it being sort of white and male and, educated. What about names that are sort of more androgynous? Because, of course, everyone knows I'm a woman and they can make assumptions. But what would happen if I had one of those sort of gender-neutral names like Chris or something like that?
Well, the evidence is that were you to apply for a job using the name, assuming that the potential employers aren't following good employment practices and being name neutral and so forth, anonymous and so forth. If people were to see your name and you were to use Hillary, you've got a lower chance of being selected for interview and getting the job than if you use the word Chris.
Yeah.
Because we live in a male world and men are preferred over women. Sorry, I don't think it's right, but I think it's true. And therefore, at least over the past few years, people called Chris have been more likely to be called to interview than people called Christine. So gender neutral names tend to favour women. It's also true that the prejudices that I had about Gabriella de Jorvik ring true. That people called people with what
Sandra
might
Potts,
be
isn't it?
considered. Sorry.
Like Sandra Potts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So names that are more common in people who are lower down the income scale, and again, it's not right, but it is true. That statistical fact, in a way, gets reflected in people's prejudices, and that happens. So you're more likely to get to Sandhurst or to be offered a place at Oxbridge if you've got the name that fits with their expectations of you. And we need to work against those prejudices. Of course, changing your name is a way of working both against and with those prejudices. And I like the idea of changing your name. I personally don't want to. And that's also partly a professional thing, that stuff that I've done is associated with this name. So were I to use another name, it's deliberately to avoid being associated.
Maybe after this, you'll be changing it. Who knows, Peter?
I do have a fake name for booking restaurants. But and leaving Facebook.
Are you going to share?
No. Obviously. If I share it, it gets linked, and that's it. So there's
Elton John, isn't it? Elton John is going by a different name, and you're using Elton's. That must be it.
That's it.
Right, we must move on to the headlines. So the first headline, because you've been spotting the headlines this week, Peter. What is the first headline we're going to discuss?
Well, I really liked the clips I watched of the US Senator Ossoff. Is his name?
Ossoff.
Ossoff.
Yes.
Interviewing Mike Hegseth, the Defense Secretary, about.
No, not Defense Secretary, is he? Secretary of War. Remember, they changed. They've
names
rebranded.
are important. Yeah, and if you want to convey the image that your business is to defend the Constitution and be a beacon of freedom and peace in the world, then change the. I was going to swear, but I apologize. But that's a name thing,
we
isn't it?
We don't care. We're adults here.
We are neo-fascists and we hate justice. Let's change the name to reflect it.
Yeah.
So Ossoff's interviewing of Hegseth, their names are difficult for me to pronounce, was, I think, a masterclass, and certainly was presented.
Do you know, it absolutely was a communications masterclass. So Ossoff started off the interrogation by thanking the personnel who've been serving in the war and commending them on their bravery. So, of course, that immediately is putting Hegseth on the back, because certainly with the next person who interrogated him, he did all that sort of fake, like, I can't believe you're, denigrating our armed service, men and women. Although I think they've cut out most of the women now, haven't they? Because they just need white men in the military. Anyway, so Ossoff did brilliantly. So he started off there, and then he got Hegseth to confirm factually some points that he had indeed asked for the amount of money he was asking for to continue this war. And then he spent the next, 6-7 questions tying Hegseth down to the words that he'd used. Whether he'd said that victory was theirs at some point in the war, and they had totally decimated the Iran military and made them redundant. And Hegseth actually had nowhere to go. And it really reminded me of sort of when I'm helping people prepare for media interviews. You basically, if you'll get asked a difficult question, the first time you ask the question, we advise them to do their ABC. Answer, bridge to control. And control is like your positive message. And then a journalist, say, would reword it and ask you it again. And again, you do answer, bridge, control. You talk about something different, but still related to what's going on. And then if you're asked the same question, but reworded the third time, you just give the A. And you sit nice and calmly. You're not getting angry or anything like that. And that's how you handle it. But it's different when you're in front of politicians. They've got their 5 minutes. They've got you on the ropes, and they're going to keep going. And the thing about Hegseth is, for all his communications experience and the fact that he used to be a TV personality, the fact is he's not a communications professional. He hasn't worked out what his key points actually are, apart from to sort of do dog whistle politics. And the fact is, you cannot polish a turd. Communications will not get you out of a tight spot. It's business practice being good that gets you out the tight spot. And we all know that war was not good business politics or any type of practice, was it? It was not good.
The whole exchange was a masterclass. So one of the things that happened, I think, in that was your final point, the stupidity and cruelty and ineffectiveness of Trump's war. So Ossoff, by asking a few questions, in a sense, it didn't matter too much what Hegseth's answers to those questions were. The point is that the message came across. You have failed, and you are aimless. Came across in the questions. I think it's also.
And you are also wrong. Like
just
multiple times, the man was wrong.
Every so often, we psychologists get asked about lie detection and body language and so forth. And I've done a secondhand. I've worked with people who've worked with. I've actually worked with people who've worked with the security services to do interrogation. And there's a very simple way to tell if somebody is lying, which is you contrast their words with objective facts. That's how you know if somebody's lying. What you don't do is read into body language. And as a bit of forensic...
so that looking to the left and looking to the right, one is remembering and one is lying, isn't true.
It's utter bollocks. The official verdict of I think it's American Psychological Association, but it's also the British Psychological Society as well, is that lie detector tests have zero validity.
Well, because actually you can control your response, can't you? You can control how you breathe.
Your response in various ways. But also, it is true to an extent that if you are a person trying to cover up a lie and you are confronted at that moment with the need to cover up that lie, your blood pressure and heart rate will rise. But so would an innocent person confronted with the possibility of 5 years in federal jail.
Yeah.
So it tells you this person is slightly nervous now. And,
I always find that the quicker someone gets to anger, you can often tell when they feel trapped. Even if they're not lying, they're certainly trapped and worried about how they're going to respond.
So Ossoff. Names, you see, names. Ossoff did that. So what he was doing with Hegseth is he said, here's an incontrovertible fact. If Hegseth had said, I did not say that, then he would have produced a printout of the tweet or whatever.
Couldn't do that.
There it is. So right from the beginning, it's both forensic in terms of police interviewing of people being confronted with the fact that there is a disparity between what they say and the truth. It's like a defense lawyer. So forensically, in terms of the legal processes, a brilliant tactic. Instead of saying defend yourself, which would allow Hegseth to defend himself, he said, here's it. He did it deadpan. And
he
what
only
I thought
once
was,
sort of spoke slightly more loudly to basically cut Hegseth off. But he kept his calm coolness. It was great.
He used the frame that he had. So if Hegseth had been interviewed, walking by a journalist, he would have used that platform. He could control the pace of his delivery, control how much he said. He could have just said fake news, but he was in front of a congressional hearing. So going, that's fake news, doesn't answer the question. He dodged most of it. And then what Ossoff did was he took the dodging as part of it. And I think that all of that is brilliant. But your point right at the end there about what message was conveyed, Hegseth conveyed the message of you're absolutely right. I'm a total idiot, and my politics and principles are utterly contemptible.
But we are biased.
That seriously, it's just a statement of fact. That's what he conveyed.
It was good,
and also, by simply asking some open-ended questions, conveyed, we're the adults in the room, and your war is futile and pointless, and you failed in all of your objectives. The other thing is, he stayed calm. Now, I can't stay calm having a conversation with you, but Ossoff stayed calm.
What does that say?
It says I shouldn't be a member of Congress, or indeed a police interrogator.
Okay.
I mean,
Well,
there's many things I can do in life,
well,
but
we've
those are two
already
roles I
ruled
probably
in world king, world president, but we're ruling out now police officer and congressman. Yeah, it's too late for you anyway.
I'll
Yeah.
stick to
Right.
beekeeper. I'm not very good at that either, but I'll stick. But no, it was a masterclass. It was also about controlling, not exactly your emotions. Ossoff wasn't. I'm reasonably confident he wasn't controlling his emotions. He was controlling his behaviour. He knew what he wanted to
Yes.
achieve, and he knew that his stone cold fury at the idiocy and wickedness of the people in front of him is
Yeah.
best conveyed with stone cold fury. So he did it, and he didn't get blustering, and he didn't use names, and he didn't say, "Oh, come on." He controlled his agenda, and he controlled
And with
his
the next
behaviour.
congressman, you can see that Hegseth took the opportunity in that changeover to the next person to interrogate him. He then got out all his bluster and his annoyance, and he got cross and this fake outrage and all the rest of it. But no, he couldn't manage it against Ossoff at all. Right, so moving on to our next headline. You've chosen Natalie Fleet resigning. Now, Natalie Fleet is such an interesting person. She's only in her early 40s, but as a child, she was raped. And she had a child, and her eldest child is the product of that rape, who she loves dearly. And this woman is absolutely amazing. She first stood for Parliament in 2019 and had to stop because of the amount of abuse that she was getting and the amount of fear there was for her safety and her well-being. And then she finally got into Parliament for Bolsover in 2024. And when Jess Phillips resigned as the safeguarding minister, in came Natalie Fleet, because she's got all this experience. And very interesting about Natalie Fleet, one of the things in reading up about her I found most interesting is that she says it's really easy for her. It's clear cut, the statutory rape, the actions that led to her having her first child, because there's her birth certificate, factual evidence, her child's birth certificate, factual evidence, and the child's date of birth. All of those things factually add up to statutory rape. And yet the other things that she's experienced, just like loads of other women up and down this country and across the world, all of a sudden, it's like, oh, what were you wearing? What were you doing out at that time on your own? How did you stay with that man? Why, and all of that becomes shades of grey. And she was really highlighting that when she stood down. But she stood down because she's been triggered. It was the Giselle Pellico stuff, this investigation into women being raped whilst they've been drugged by often intimate partners, that was the straw that broke her back. And those are her words. And being triggered, whilst it's bandied about across the internet all the time at the moment, actually, including Don Jr.'s book was called Triggered. Can you believe that when he got it out? She's actually sticking clear to what triggered is all about, isn't it? Being triggered from past trauma. Can you explain to us, Peter, a little bit about being triggered and about triggering from a psychological perspective?
Well, I mean, the whole thing, triggering trauma, the huge epidemic of attacks on women, not only in this country but across the world. The whole thing is a massive topic. I mean, triggering is in psychological terms. I mean, it's a word, and it probably means lots of things, and there's probably a bit of controversy over it, and so and I'll talk about this a little bit in a minute, maybe. But of course, we're reminded of things that are distressing, and when we're reminded of things that are distressing, I guess the best way to think about triggering is both in terms of your cognitions, the things that you're thinking about, in terms of your emotions, and therefore your ability to remain focused on the things that matter to you, become a little bit impaired. The reminder of something important is triggering in the sense that it becomes a massive stimulus. It's a threat response. I mean, I think I might have mentioned the idea that, if a mother rabbit gives birth to 3 baby rabbits and one of those baby rabbits goes, oh, it's a fox, yeah, not terribly important. That little baby rabbit will not survive to have rabbits of her own. We are absolutely evolutionary programmed to spot threats, focus on them, attend to them, and do something about them. And so if you've been in an intensely threatening situation, then stimuli that remind you of that threat will grab your attention and will have emotional and cognitive responses. And that's difficult for people. And you can be walking down the street, somebody will say something, and you're just off on a tangent, and that's triggering, and that's important. And it's important to recognise that that will happen for people, and to respect that. I think the ideas in my head about Fleet's experience and resignation, there are just loads of spin-offs. So the first is, I know nothing about the circumstances of her appointment, but my view is that people like Fleet, for various reasons, should be absolutely spotted for responsibility in high office, and it makes her more admirable in my mind that she can spot the issues associated with that appointment, but I would simply divert her to a position of similar responsibility in an area where her clear attributes will make her valuable for the other job, and she can avoid the negative consequences of the job. I mean, I just think it means that Burnham should identify her as the person who will get the good job next time there's an appropriate one available to her.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think admirable response. If it's the case, so one of the things, just as a diversion, of course, is if you're a judge in the High Court, you can listen to witness statements, you can listen to victim impact statements, you can appreciate the evidence, but we want the judges to sit back and not unemotionally and not clinically, but we want them objectively to weigh up all of the issues. If Fleet was saying that the issues were such that she felt she was in danger of losing her objectivity, excellent. Then yes, somebody else probably should have that job. If it was impacting on her mental health, where she was going home traumatized, I once spoke to somebody whose job was to filter user-produced videos for the BBC. So people would send in videos. Her job was to filter it, and she said, "I'm never going to have children." Now, jobs that have that impact on you are jobs that we need to protect people when they're in, right?
Absolutely.
So if Fleet is protecting her mental health, then she's a positive example to other people.
She described her resignation as putting her own life jacket on first, and I think that's absolutely brilliant. And the fact is, what an absolute strong woman to be able to come from that background and all the trauma that she's experienced to get into office to make a difference for other people. In terms of trigger, it's actually, it comes directly from the trigger on a gun, which used to be called a tricker. And that comes from the Dutch trekken, which means to pull. And it first started being used, is my understanding, is around after one of the big wars, because people were coming back from the war and they were being highly sensitive to loud noises or things that took them back to the battlefield. And that's where it actually comes from. You know, whether it's a smell of some smoke or something like that just took them straight back to that incident. It is such a strong emotion to be triggered when you have trauma. And basically that triggering is either to say, like you said, keep you alive. It's the fear response that does make you safe. Or indeed it is showing that you still need to do some psychological work, isn't it, on the trauma that you've experienced?
But do you know what? I mean, again, that it's the same point in a way, but it's just a lovely way of referring back to Fleet. I just think she seems an admirable human being on the basis of this experience, on the grounds that she noticed something that was having a consequence for her, and she did the right thing in response. She didn't cover it up. She didn't act inappropriately. She spotted it and she responded. And I think that's an admirable role model. I think it also, as a sort of trivial point, I think it's also good to keep in the public domain the fact that there are so many offences against women and children, and we need to remember. While extradition hearings are continuing in the States, we need to remember that there are a lot of men out there who attack women.
Yes, there are a lot of men who attack women, and in my experience, it is usually cis men who attack women and not actually trans women who attack women. Right, moving on. The last story that you picked today is to talk about Andy Burnham. We're back to politics, my favourite subject, and about him allowing Trump to use the bases to make a strike on Iran, which actually happened this week. And it's not a new policy, is it? It is a continuation, really, from where Starmer was. But it does raise an interesting question about how Burnham is going to handle Trump, because there's lots of leaders of organizations and countries who have tried a myriad of ways of how to make it work. I mean, if you listen to the rest of Politics USA, the mooch would definitely say that, Burnham is a winner and Trump likes winners, although he doesn't like people who take attention from him. So Burnham might be up in his mind already. What do you think is going to go on here in terms of how Burnham's going to handle Trump?
I don't know. And obviously I'm not party to any of the discussions in the corridors of power that are going on at the moment. But it does strike me that, again, there's issues of authenticity. So I look at wealthy bankers connected to corrupt professional gamblers grinning in the lift with Trump and posing with flashing teeth at all of the gold and glitz. And I think my fantasy includes doing the exact opposite of that. My fantasy is pretty close to Hugh Grant in Love Act. Is it Love Actually? Well, one of them anyway.
I think so.
Where he basically says, "Yeah, no, you can jog
on." Yeah.
And that's my fantasy. But even for me, and I can be a bit silly, I know that those are fantasies. So the idea of thinking, if I were Prime Minister, what I would do is I'd blow a raspberry down the phone and then I'd put the phone down on him, because that's what I would do. And I see, to be honest, I mean, quite a lot of my friends are quite left-wing, and I see in conversations on social media and conversations in real life, people go, "Oh, Burnham, he says he's going to stand up to Trump, and then he let him basically collaborate in war crimes by allowing our bases to be used for his warplanes." And you go back to the fantasy of, what I would do is, and I think that's childish, because if it were the case that Britain were to take a particularly antagonistic attitude towards Trump, then people would suffer.
Yeah.
People would suffer.
And you're right, although you just don't want the bullies to win. But I think Carney's done it quite well.
Carney's done it very well.
accepts that he's got to work to a certain extent, but he's not going to be bullied. I mean, they think Carney was the man responsible for getting Trump to back down on those stupid tariffs that went across everywhere, because Carney caused a run on the bond markets. But certainly Trump is back after Carney, isn't he, with the 50% tariffs on
So this
Canada
is what I
at the
think
moment.
probably Burnham will do, and I think this is what I would hope he would do. So I read an article, I think it might have been in The Economist. There's an article about quite overt statements made by European and other world leaders about how they were collectively handling Trump. And the article, I do not know whether this is true, but the journalist writing this article said they are overtly talking to each other at Davos and G7 and so forth, and they are saying, this is our strategy for handling Trump. One of the messages was that Mark Rutte, I think he's head of NATO, his persona with Trump was to say, absolutely yes, here are the technical issues. Trump would get bored, and then one of the other world leaders would say, come on, mate, let's distract you with something shiny, probably made of gold.
Well, Rutte's approach has surely been to lick the arse of Trump, I think. Isn't that really his own approach?
He doesn't have electors, a voting public that would tell him that he needs to stand up to the bully.
And Infantino as well.
Yeah, so they're taking different roles in the careful management of Trump's. But
that's quite interesting.
What I would hope. Yeah, what I would hope Andy Burnham would do is he would have a conversation collectively with the other world leaders that says something along the lines of, I cannot, in conscience, go along with this. I am going to oppose it. How can I fit in with our strategy? And I don't know, as you know, I'm not really into team games, but like a football team, you go, right, the fantasy is that you run up to the end of the pitch and then you head in the winning goal, but actually you'll be offside each time. Please don't do that. It's a fantasy. This is not Roy of the Rovers. You're not the only person on the pitch. And what I hope is that the civil servants in Whitehall say, if you want to follow this principled approach to managing the major threats to freedom and prosperity that Trump presents, we collectively should do this. And your role in it to do that. And the way that you could swing it with the electorate who might not understand is to have this presentational strategy. And I hope he gets it right. And like Ossoff, I think I hope that he accepts the realpolitik that when you've got a major world superpower with treaty obligations to them, you can't behave like a schoolboy, but you can
Absolutely.
say these are the limits
And
on our
actually,
behaviour, and these are the parameters in which we're working.
Starmer was sort of a bit commended on his
Mm-hmm.
approach to world affairs, but they sort of made a lot, both the media and the opposition, about perhaps he was being a bit too kind to Trump and things like that, and was he the Trump whisperer and everything. But what I really liked about Starmer's approach was he was never rude to Trump, but every time he had to say, I don't agree with you, he would agree. And he would say, well, actually, that guy, Burnham, is my friend. Or he would also, straight after Zelensky getting that mauling in the White House, Zelensky was here meeting the king and meeting Keir Starmer. So the actions spoke of an intent of where we were going, even though we weren't trying to point score or go down to Trump's level. And I thought that was really clever. And I hope Burnham does continue that strength of saying, I'm still going to defend Greenland. I'm still going to defend Zelensky and the Ukrainian people, because actually that's where everyone banding together, including Canada and New Zealand and Australia, that's the holy grail, isn't it?
So I think there's another point I'd like to make, which is both politics and human psychology. And I suppose it's about authenticity to an extent, but it's about the principles to which people are acting, and it's about balancing various principles. So I think that I'm not in favour of censorship. I'm generally in favour of letting people do what they want. I absolutely wouldn't want young children to have access to some of the social media apps that are available on their phone.
Or porn.
Yeah.
Frankly.
So then you get, it's kind of a simple point, which is there's a principle of autonomy, freedom, liberty, trust. Those are decent principles. Protecting children is a bit of an important principle. So when it comes to kind of Burnham and Trump, what you were talking about is there are some things that I think are quite important, like conveying the message that I do not agree with you, like standing up to racists, like calling out misogyny, like pointing out people's errors in their logic. And they're good, right? They're good things. And so you have fantasies about, if I was at the White House and Trump said that, I would say X, Y, and Z. But there are also other principles, like trying to maintain some sort of forward momentum on controlling climate change.
Well,
trying to have some sort of international dialogue about conflicts that involve the death of civilians. And so if Burnham is aiming for some sort of trivial pub parlor game of what I would say to Trump, I would be a little bit cautious. What I would prefer him to do is to be the adult in the room who is trying his best to keep focused on the principles that I hold dear.
Absolutely. I tell you what is going to be fun, though, is Miliband as Foreign Secretary meeting Trump. I think that could be quite amusing. And on names, wonder if Burnham got Ed but thought he was buying David. I mean, David at one point was tipped to come back to be Foreign Secretary. So are they getting Ed to be just like, proxy for David? Who knows which Miliband brother is actually going to be there?
Well, all I could say is that given the state of Donald J. Trump's frontal lobes, they could probably start with Ed, then slip in David, and he probably wouldn't notice.
That is a really good point for us to end on this week.
Check, couldn't they?
No, but he's got bigly intelligence, that man, and he is just acing being able to name an aubergine. That's how good he is these days on his psychometric tests.
I received my professional qualification in clinical psychology about 30 years ago, and I've practiced continuously. I've seen him talk.
Okay, enough said. Right, before we go, we have just time for our concept of the week and our triple T. Concept of the week then, Peter, what are we talking about today?
Well, we're talking about authenticity, and we're talking about authenticity between friends. We're talking about authenticity in relationships. We're talking about authenticity when we're choosing other people. There is that famous quote, I think, from one of the Marx brothers, the comedians, that if you can fake authenticity, then you've got it made. And I suppose there's also the issue of what happens in relationships where you realise that somebody has lied to you or let you down, and so I think that the whole principle about it is about the principle of authenticity, and I suppose the idea of trust. This relates to mirror neurons, I suppose, in that you look at other people, you see their behaviour, you think about what they're doing. The trust comes from I'm always constructing and inferring what my sort of model of reality is, and I have to make assumptions about your behaviour, and I make assumptions that Andy Burnham is negotiating in my best interest, because I can do nothing else. And authenticity is the way of building trust, so that you can then rely on that person. You can rely on that person to look after your daughter when you're not there. You can rely on that person to make sure that if they go to a festival and they're left behind, somebody's got their back and make sure that they're not on their own coming home.
Well, and I mean,
so
Trump being his authentic self is not going to help you want him to be babysitting your daughter. Let's face it.
And then it comes back to the issue of names. So then you get, is somebody playing something rather dubious because they've changed their identity and why, or have they selected a name and an identity that reflects who they truly are?
Yes.
So the changing of name and the selection of your name to reflect your honest self. Now, I never met Gabriella de Jorvik, and it's quite possible I missed out on meeting some sort of Saxon beauty with flaxen hair and heir to the lost kingdom of Wessex. So I got turned off.
Surely Yorkshire de Jorvik, anyway.
Well, yes, one would assume so, yeah. But yeah. So anyway, authenticity is what, and
from a communications
you get a long
point
way
of
in
view,
life just by being you.
You do, and you're the best you, and you're a rubbish someone else. That's the way I look at it. You'll at least only ever be second best if you try and be someone else other than yourself. But stress does mean that some people find it very difficult to be their authentic self. I always felt that one of the reasons Hillary Clinton did not win back in the day in 2016 was because she struggled to know which of her authentic selves, because we're never just one thing. She was a successful politician and a successful mum and all the rest of it, but she didn't know how to present herself to the people, and therefore they didn't see her as being authentic. Well, that and Trump had his slogan, which was, well, no, it wasn't Trump's, well, Crooked Hillary, of course, did her in, but her slogan was, love trumps hate. And you're like, why have you got Trump in the actual slogan? Surely you're just making sure everyone says, love Trump. We love Trump, not Trump hate. Anyway, I thought that was a ridiculous slogan. So authenticity is our concept of the week. Very important to try and just be yourself. And it's a bit like if you go in for a job interview, you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. And if you don't get the job, likely you weren't going to be a good fit and you weren't going to be very happy there anyway. But if you can get yourself feeling confident enough in that scenario so you can be yourself, you've got a much better chance of actually getting the job that would be the best one for you. Triple T then, that was almost a triple T, a tip to try, a bite-sized chunk of well-being. What are we talking about today?
Well, it relates to Ossoff and authenticity, which is if you're in a tight spot, ask a question. When you're conversing with people, ask a question. I apologies if there's a long.
Liars do that as well, though, to be fair, because they don't want to answer their own question that they've been asked, so they ask their own.
But it's things like social anxiety and stuff. I was once in Norwich examining a PhD thesis, and I was out to dinner on the evening. It was Valentine's Day, so I was on my own in a restaurant, and I observed a footballer. So he was Norwich City, presumably, but anyway, talking to this woman who was clearly very, very interested in him, but he was completely tongue-tied, and she kept on reaching into the conversation with extremely welcome invites, and he couldn't say anything at all. And I was so tempted when she went to the loo to run over and go, ask her some open-ended questions. It could be anything. You know, what would be your favourite animal?
Not quite
where would you like
anything.
to go on? Ask questions. So my tip of the week would be, if you feel kind of uncomfortable or or stuck or socially anxious or don't know where it's going. You ask open-ended questions. And if people ask you difficult questions, then you go, oh my word, that's a very difficult question. Why did you ask that?
Well, there you
always
go.
ask questions.
I like
Always
that.
ask
It
questions.
won't work in media interviews, just if you're
It won't
wanting
work
some
in
help.
media interviews. And that's why Hegseth struggled, because Ossoff controlled it. It wouldn't work with me and you.
Yeah.
It would.
Well,
It wouldn't work.
we now know why you and I do what we do, because we like to ask questions and we got quite good at asking questions. Hey, that's a nice tip. I like that. That's it for this week. If you would like to get in touch and let us know what we should be talking about next week, then our email is hello@experiencepodco.com. If you've got a concept of the week that you'd like us to explore, or if you have a clearly not really moment where we have said something a little bit hyperbolic and it's slightly wrong, then please do get in touch as well. Have a great week. Thank you, Peter.
My pleasure. Thank you, Hilary.
The Experience podcast is hosted by Hilary Jeffs and Peter Kinderman, produced by James Jones at Granary Digital. You can find us on social media, and you can get in touch via email at hello@experiencepodco.com with any questions, comments or topics you'd like us to cover. And don't forget to leave us a review.